who is one of the most dedicated, passionate people about changing education today. Unfortunately, Gene has been in National Airport in Washington, D.C. since 7 a.m. and has still not landed. So, being flexible and using new models, we're going to have Steve talk to us about the trends and issues and his national perspective from the federal government, and allow some extra time for you to have networking opportunities. Gene is really upset that he's not able to be here with us. I have been talking to him over months about this event and can tell you that he was at one of the very first Virtual School Symposiums when it was hosted in Louisville, Kentucky, when there were only 125 people in the room. And it would have thrilled Gene to be here and see 1,900 people who believe in these new learning models through online and blended learning and making it happen on the ground. The work that he is doing at CCSSO, many of you are familiar with the Common Core of State Standards, but the work that he's doing on next generation learning, leading those 7 states, New Hampshire, New York, Maine, Kentucky, Ohio, Wisconsin, and West Virginia, that have signed up for anytime, anywhere learning, personalized learning, and helping to create more student-centered environments. And the districts that are partners in those innovation labs are providing breakthroughs, and other states and districts on their own are following the lead. So in Gene's absence, I'm so sorry that he can't be here, and I know that he said that he was unable to make it in time. If by some miracle his plane lands early and he comes in, we will have him, so I'll be looking. But with that, I'm really pleased to introduce today a friend and colleague, the U.S. Department of Education. Steve Midgley is the Deputy Director of the Office of Educational Technology. His principal areas of focus are online learning, data transparency, digital interoperability, and the Learning Registry. Prior to arriving at education, he was Director of Education at the Federal Communications Commission, FCC, where he headed the team which developed the education chapter of the National Broadband Plan, which is, if you haven't read it, an exceptional piece of work. It highlights the benefits and the challenges and the opportunities of online learning. Prior to government service, he was the principal of Mixrun, a CTO consultancy for a number of education sector organizations, and served as a program manager for the Stupski Foundation for 6 years, designing and implementing grants for technology, working with districts in K-12 education. So let's start from a national perspective and welcome, please join me in welcoming Steve Midgley.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be able to talk. I'm sorry that Gene's not here. His perspective is quite important as well. So I will do my best, but I am no surrogate for Gene Longley. So to set expectations, I'm going to start with a blank slide. Just to give you a little background about myself, some people have called me a cranky bureaucrat or a funny bureaucrat. I didn't expect to be in a role like this. I didn't expect to be doing the work that I'm doing. I'm very grateful for the opportunity. I spent a lot of time working and interacting with the internet, and from the very early days, 300 baud modems, and a very small hacker culture. So my background is not someone coming out of government, coming out of institutional thought process. So I really want to emphasize that the federal government and the people I work with have been very supportive of me working in a very unusual space, I think, for government, exploring research in the spaces that many of you work, in a way that is a little bit uncomfortable for the status quo and a little bit unusual in terms of methods. I'm not an educator. I spent a lot of years working with educators, but this is not my profession. I'm a technologist, and I try to bring the thoughts and perspectives of the technology community into education, but recognizing that the hard work is done by educators. So I want to talk a little bit about a federal perspective first, and I will get that out of the way and then get to some interesting topics. But I actually do find this pretty meaningful, the question of why, which our current president has set a goal, which I think is actually very meaningful for everyone in this room who believes in virtual and online and blended education. The goal is, by 2020, America will once again lead the world in college graduates. And if you think through the actual numbers here, if we graduate every student in the system today, everyone, and we know that doesn't happen and that's shameful, but if we were to, we would not hit that goal. The only way to hit this goal is to bring people back to the system and provide them with credentials. Now that's a bold goal, which I think is appropriate if you're going to think big. But the implication is we're not going to have a grade 13. We're not going to add that many classrooms to the system. The infrastructural constraint is too great. The only way we're going to do this is with technology. There's no other way. If you believe that that's a meaningful goal, if you think that that's where the country should go, the only way to accomplish it is what you're doing. So for me, that's an important perspective, and I wanted to sort of bring that before I get into some context. I think it's really important. I mean, as much as we all work in technology, and as much as we connect the students that are near you in your systems to technology and to learning through technology, these things are changing incredibly rapidly. And so I want to talk a little bit about what I know in the community that I live in, what we know about these changes, and try to give you some perspective, some projections of where things might be headed and what that means in education and how you can try to get out in front of some of those issues. So this is just a reflective and hopefully engaging set of ideas that I want to just move around the room with you, and obviously happy to engage with you afterwards as well. I mean, the concept of a basic education is going to change, and I think as we go through some of these statistics, I think you will see what I'm trying to get at, and hopefully I'll be able to tie some of this up towards the end. But this is essentially a talk from my perspective about the future and what we can learn today in terms of keeping up. So the first point, this is access. This is a question that the UN has taken up recently, and the internet is now considered to be a human right, according to the UN. And this is not an insubstantial observation. You might think it's crazy, but what drove this decision, what drove this movement, is watching what happened during the Arab Spring and watching the kind of organization that the internet enabled in society, in the real world. So this isn't about internet hackers and internet culture. This is about people changing their lives, people changing their governments, people changing the way they live, using the internet as a tool. So this is no longer about digital skills, digital literacy over there, and you need that too. You don't need a little word processor. And then, oh, and by the way, here's your life, and here's your job, and here's what you really need to know. This is about saying the internet is enabling society to function differently. I think that's a very significant observation, and whether they're a little ahead of the curve or a little behind the curve, it's worth paying attention that very serious international organizations consider access to the internet to be a critical part of the human experience. Reading, obviously, very important. The particular perspective that I'd like to share, just in terms of projections, Amazon, many of you are familiar with this company, as a bellwether, as a trend indicator, I think can be very interesting. Amazon today is selling more ebooks, digital books, than hardbacks or paperbacks combined. They're selling more digital books than print books today. So in terms of where we're going, I know this is not news to a lot of you, but in terms of where we're going digital. Writing. What does even writing mean anymore? It's an open question. It's very important. I know that a lot of you believe it. I believe that the number one skill that you need to succeed in life is the ability to write well, the ability to compose your thoughts, the ability to organize in writing what you're thinking. That said, just fingers on a keyboard or pen on paper isn't the only kind of writing anymore. There's a much deeper kind of communication, or not deeper per se, but a much broader set of communication skills. For example, on YouTube, video sharing service, as of last month, 48 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube every minute. It was 35 hours in April. So from April to September, we went from 35 hours a minute uploaded to 48 hours a minute uploaded. That's 240,000 full-length movies every week. So you think about Hollywood and teen movies. Right? I mean, a lot of this is cats falling off pianos, right? It's not all high-quality stuff. That's okay. It's 240,000 movies. 40,000 movies. It's not all going to be great. But people are communicating with each other. You're seeing people put things up on the net, and then other people respond to those things with counter conversations. So people are having threaded discussions on video, right? In addition to the chat rooms and these other things that are going on. This is a new thing. The users are watching 3 billion videos every day. There's only 7 billion people on the planet. 3 billion videos watched every day. 2 billion in April. So again, one of the emphasis I want to make here is the very, very steep J-curve that we're on right now, even at the very largest scale of the internet, in terms of the kind of growth that we're seeing, the kinds of pieces of society that are moving into the online space, that you think, oh, well, we had pretty good penetration in the 90s, and then, we did better. And that society is rapidly digitizing a huge portion of the way it communicates with itself. And so education is going to figure into that, and I will tie this up, I hope. Just another stat, Facebook, heard of that? 800 million active users, 800 million active users. Half of those users log in every day. 400 million people figure out what their password is and log in every day, right? So when we think about the problems of running enterprise systems and digital management of users and whatever, that number was 500 million in April. 800 million users now, 500 million in April. So we added 300 million users in less than 6 months. There's only 7 billion on the planet, so there is a limit. But this isn't to say that Facebook is great for education. This is to say the way in which people are communicating, the way in which people are finding each other, the way in which society is organizing itself to solve problems is changing, and it will continue to change fairly rapidly. And I think that when we think about the skills and tools that students need, we have to be appreciating that it's not just word processing, it's not just analysis, right? There's other sets of skills in terms of coordination, communication, community that we have to appreciate in this as well. I think that we can't ignore social media. Whether we want kids to be fooling around on Facebook in school when they should be working, I think that's a very rational and reasonable question to be asking. But if we're not looking at how social media can be used inside the learning process, I think we're leaving out a huge component of what's becoming very rapidly a core part of how many people think about their social life, their community, their intellectual sort of relationships. Twitter, likewise, is growing very rapidly and I think represents a lot of opportunities to share and communicate. I don't need to cite stats there, but I want to emphasize the notion that Twitter represents a different way of thinking about how to find information. You can go on Google and search for things and connect to things through this algorithm, right? Twitter, you pick your friends and they tell you what to read, right? Your friends might not be co-local, and it's very unlikely that they are, but they're telling you what's important to them. And then you're telling that you can communicate back to them what's important to you. Now, that can be very lightweight and inconsequential conversations, and often is, but it can be very sincere and important conversations about which blog articles are the ones that are most important. What are the thoughts and zeitgeist that is moving through your community, your profession, that you need to know about. And if you construct your community correctly, you can find out a lot about what's going on in the world. Now, this is not an advocacy for Twitter and Facebook. This is about talking about this construction of a social community, which is a new innovation in technology. And I think it pays us to think that through in terms of what the implications are in terms of learning communities and the relationship between different groups of students and teachers who are working together in a digital environment. Similarly, and this one is very important to me personally, is Wikipedia. Many of you, I'm sure, work with it a lot. It's the 6th most popular website in the United States, 3.6 million articles, and I don't care what anybody says, those articles are pretty good. I'm really, to be perfectly honest, tired of hearing people bend my ear about, you can't rely on Wikipedia. I don't get it. I don't get it. I hope you're on my side on this one. There's stuff that's wrong in there, but there's stuff that's wrong in textbooks. And it's free. In fact, people cite this Nature study that found Wikipedia had double the errors to Encyclopedia Britannica, but if you read that article, you will see that in fact Wikipedia's article length is twice as long. So the errors per paragraph, errors per inch are the same. It's just there's twice as much information. So be careful with those stats. For me, if you don't know how to use Wikipedia and you leave school, you're in trouble. I was working at the FCC, as Susan mentioned, revolving loan fund. I studied anthropology. I don't know what a revolving loan fund is. But I needed to find out. Start at Wikipedia, go out to my network through Twitter and my email community, and I start getting information flowing back, right? But Wikipedia was the baseline by which I could understand this subject, which I could get a baseline. Some of it might be wrong, the details were opinionated. I don't care. I now know something that I didn't know. So now I'm a layman, and now I'm on the road to becoming an expert. And then my community brought me up to the point where I could speak cogently to economists about this topic and advocate for the right position. And if you're not able to engage with information in that way, leaving school, you're really slotted for a particular track, a particular type of job, and a particular type of life. Okay, so that is advocacy, that is Wikipedia, and I love it. This one is a little bit hard for me to even speak the words. 94% of adults who went to college use the internet. 39% of those who did not graduate from high school use the internet. I'm not saying that using the internet gets you to go through college. What I'm saying is college graduates have a huge advantage over those who don't finish high school because they can access the internet. They know how to use it, and they know how to take advantage of it. When they look for a job, I'm from the San Francisco Bay Area, you can't find a job in the newspaper anymore. They're not there. None of the good jobs are there. If you don't know about Craigslist and some of the other job board sites, and you can't interact with them, you can't create a compelling digital resume, you can't engage in an online conversation before they decide to bring you in for your in-person interview, you're screwed. I mean, I don't know any other word to use. This is a major equity issue. So these skills are critical. I know that I'm preaching to the choir, to a large degree, but I think that these numbers are important, and I just want to engage with you on them. Many of you heard Michael Horn speak. Clay Christensen, and he wrote a book called Disrupting Class. In that book, they predict that 50% of all high school classes will be taught online by 2020, which suggests that maybe that 2020 goal isn't as far-fetched as it sounds. That President Obama's 2020 goal, that is. You're on the leading edge of this. And this is more than just individual students, right? This is about economic development. This is about succeeding as a country as well as individuals. But as I think through the economic implications, I do think of what are the critical skills that we need. And I don't see them in the curriculum explicitly. So I feel like there's something going on in many curricula. I know there's good ones out there, so don't get me wrong. It's not a universal statement. But as we think about what are the skills that people need to succeed, it's going through a process of curriculum. You acquire a set of skills related to those activities, right? So whether you're studying chemistry or English literature, you're acquiring skills around problem solving and critical thinking. You're hopefully developing teamwork. Data analysis, I mean, depends on what form of critical analysis you come out of in the English sort of field, but some of them even do data analysis, media savvy research, and as I said, writing. These skills are everywhere, but to some extent I feel like in many curricula, and I'm not accusing anybody, they're nowhere. That we teach the skills of learning through specific tasks and specific activities. And yes, it's important to understand algebra, and yes, it's important to have read Great Gatsby, but it's what you do with those activities, what you acquire as a result of going through that process that to me is so important. And I think that the digital environment offers tremendous opportunities. I'll just digress a little further, thinking through World of Warcraft, which is not something I was intending to bring up. And there's a lot of time wasted on World of Warcraft. I don't play it myself, and I think I count myself lucky, because if I did, I might not get a lot of other things done. But that said, there are people who interact with that community who acquire certain important skills as a result of their activity. So the question of did you slay the dragon has no implication, whereas can you solve for X in this, univariate equation maybe does have some significance. You can apply that again. Killing the dragon doesn't actually have a social implication. But in order to have killed the dragon, you had to engage in sophisticated logistics planning, in detailed teamwork and organization. You had to show up on time, right? You had to work through difficulties with others, right? There are a number of skills that are very important out of a very non-important activity like social gaming. So I'm not advocating that we replace school with social gaming at all. I think that's a terrible idea. But I am saying that the skills that you need to succeed aren't necessarily always represented in the curriculum. I think we do ourselves a disservice if we look at the world against that curriculum rather than looking underneath that to say, what are the human characteristics of success, and looking at all the places where those are expressed and motivated and taught and built. Clay Christensen writes a lot about innovation, and he was one of my heroes in the 90s when I was working in the internet boom on innovation. And I think one of the important takeaways that I will try to relate from my experience in that environment and understanding Clay as best as I could, that we can leverage tools and solutions from other sectors. And I think that that's very important. But we also have to be honest that, buying a blender on Amazon and teaching a kid algebra are different, and one is a lot harder than the other. So the notion that just the social media, the collaborative filtering, the deep data stuff, which I'm a huge advocate of, are going to fix our problems, going to make this world work, is a fiction. It's a fiction. It will not happen. And anyone who's selling you tools that make that case alone is selling you fiction. The hard work is between people who are transmitting knowledge, transmitting learning, transmitting experience, and creating the motivation and understanding that goes with it. And there's no computer that's going to do that for us. What I love about the internet is that that's a community. It's not, I'm not talking to a computer, I'm talking to other people out in the world, whether they be programmatic representations, which I and others engage in. I can interact with the website, which is the data trail of the human, or I'm actually interacting through those websites with other real people. But that's a community. It's not the only one, but it's a one. And so if you look at the technology from that perspective, in terms of how does it leverage the things that I know are important, whether physically or other worlds, then I think you can evaluate technology in terms of its place in your educational environment more effectively. I'm a big advocate for the power of data, and you'll hear about that hopefully in a minute, but it alone isn't the answer. Another way to put that is we need education-specific innovation, but not too much. Don't forget that there are tools out there, whether it be Google Docs or Microsoft Live, or Wikipedia, there are tools out there that are general purpose, accessible for society, and they're very meaningful to bring into education. But those alone are not the educational magic. And don't let anyone tell you that they are. My final point on this concept is just a request. Many of you are direct with students, educators, and many of you are administrators, decision makers, vendors, and otherwise. So we've been talking a lot about the educators. I'm going to step over and talk a little bit to the others in the room. Interoperability, flow of data, sharing of information is really important. Please help. Buying systems that don't interoperate is a disservice to the students and the educators in your system. You are shutting them out from a larger community that's out there. And you should demand of your vendors that they provide effective interoperability. And it won't come... The vendors build what you ask them to build. It's very hard for innovators in the vendor community to bring solutions that you're not asking for. They can bend and they can innovate, that's true, but where the market moves on the demand side, the market moves on the supply side. You hold that power. The money starts on one side of the table every year, and it goes across to the other side of the table for systems and services, and your RFPs and your buying requirements define that movement. And so you have a lot of control over this. So where you're not comfortable or familiar with what these requirements might look like, I encourage you to reach out, whether to iNacol or other organizations who can represent these interests. Certainly the federal government, you're always welcome to contact me or others there. We don't always have the answer, but we're certainly happy to talk about it. Actually, I did have one final point about this, which is the cloud. I mentioned Google and Microsoft Live and Google Apps and these sorts of things. The cloud's a big deal. And again, it's not an end-all be-all, but it is a big deal, and it is worth your time to pay attention to this. I do not think this is a fad. This is a representation of information through flexible services out in the internet that will help you solve some problems that are much more difficult to solve with local, enterprise-based, big iron solutions. There's a lot of misinformation about what the cloud is, right? Once cloud gets popular, then everyone's got a cloud. So look closely. But in many cases, there are things you can do with the internet, with the cloud, that are just really hard to solve in any other way. Actually, I want to stay on that slide for a minute. I'm almost done. So as I mentioned, I just went on a big tirade about how data isn't the answer, and now I'm going to go on a big tirade about how data is the answer. first perspective I'd like to bring is that most data we don't keep. That's okay, because a lot of that data isn't important. But there is a lot of data that we don't keep in education that is very useful. We lose it. The primary example that I can give you is how much we solve in the classroom every day, and how many times that solution is reinvented every year. And if we can connect those communities of educators in more effective ways, those solutions can build on top of each other rather than reinventing each other again and again. Conferences like this are really, really powerful ways to get in person and communicate and share. But I think that there are technological supplements to these sorts of in-person activities that can help you in your day-to-day existence. And I'll just give you a very specific example to make this clear. Let's say there's a teacher in East Texas working with minor kids on algebra, and they find a set of resources or build them themselves that work really well for that population in that environment for that particular learning objective. There's teachers in Central California who would love to know that, and they're never going to find out today, unless they happen to meet each other at a conference like this, and that's not good enough. And so when I talk about data flowing, I'm not just talking about the transcripts and the formal structures of data that we think about. I'm talking about semi-structured data, this big data concept, the opinions of users, the connections between users that we lose, that we don't track, and that we should be sharing, because we have a model that is based on an environment where everyone couldn't touch everyone else. You needed hierarchical pyramidal structures in order to deploy organizational systems. Those days are gone. They're gone. They're gone. You can build with 3 programmers in 6 months what it used to take teams of 30 or 60 people, just on the technology front. You can run finance operations, right? You can run research operations, right? The scale of business today in terms of what's possible in decentralized, non-hierarchical organizational systems is incredibly powerful. That's moving, as I said, 800 million Facebook users. This is moving out into society, and it's going to come into education. I think you guys are on the forefront of that. Tying those things together in your environment, connecting teachers who previously couldn't find each other together is critical. I'll mention the Learning Registry, which Susan alluded to, which is a decentralized data network that I've been working on as a research project at the Department of Education that we released on Monday, that offers some tools to help along this road. It's not a destination. Don't go to learningregistry.com. It's not a place to go. It's a place to plug your systems into so they can talk to each other. So the users don't go to Learning Registry. They keep going where they're going. We want those systems to talk to each other more effectively so that when a teacher figures something out in Moodle over here, it shows up in Blackboard over here for the teacher that wanted to know about that. The notion that expertise is at the bottom of the pyramid is great. Eventually, maybe we can get rid of the pyramid. That would be better. All right. Thank you for putting up with that. Skip a few things. This one's big, badges. It's a big idea, and I wanted to present it last because I think it is extremely relevant in the communities that you're working in and the ways in which you are doing work. It is a challenge to the status quo, and I think many of you can get behind that. Badges are a new innovation. MacArthur Foundation has been funding the Mozilla Foundation, interesting partnership, to develop a badge infrastructure that we can use. That's just the technology. Most of us shouldn't care about that. What does it mean? Anyone can issue a badge about anything to anyone else. That's crazy. What good is that? So if I want to send me your email, I'll issue a badge that you're an expert in quantum physics. Well, who cares? Because Midgley doesn't know anything about quantum physics, so that's not a meaningful badge. Great. Because if someone else is getting a meaningful badge from a real expert who's got certification from, say, the Harvard Physics Department that he is an expert, and you're getting badges from him, and you're getting badges from me. My badges aren't meaningful. People disrepute them, and they highly regard the ones coming from an expert. But because anyone can issue a badge about anything, who's the expert becomes an opinion. And to me, this just reflects the way society actually works, and not the way we try to construct it, the way human relations actually work. So in some contexts, there's expertise that is meaningful, and in other contexts, that expertise is not meaningful. If I'm presented with a master's student who is badged from a highly credentialed university as an expert in JavaScript, that badge, JavaScript, programming language, and then Mozilla Foundation certifies somebody as an expert in JavaScript, one of the core developers of JavaScript in the internet, and I'm faced with the decision of which person to hire, it's not obvious who I should pick. Okay. That's a new kind of credentialing, right? It's not saying the diploma is the only thing that matters. It's not saying where you went is the only thing that matters. Where you went, because that organization has the skills to deliver the things you need, and others recognize those skills as valued from that location, is a very powerful and hopefully dangerous idea that we can unpack here. Badges can disrupt traditional accountability. They can disrupt the way in which we share learning with each other. As frontline activists in the digital learning revolution, I think you all should be issuing digital badges to your students and to each other for the skills they're acquiring, both at the course level, at the graduation level, and anywhere else you can find a place to squeeze them in. Those badges can be surfaced by those learners on Facebook, on LinkedIn, or wherever else they want to share them. They can embed them in their digital resumes, wherever they want to put them, and they can prove that they did what you said they did to others who want to know that. And I think that credentialing model offers some really, really interesting opportunities for the future. It's an edge-to-middle change, but I think a lot of you are comfortable with the notion that there's edge-to-middle revolution going on right now in education. Disrupting the status quo, I think, is something that can drive learning to a higher level without challenging the notion that we all need a public education system in which to run our learning systems. The best learning and the best place to trust your kid won't get in trouble are two different things. And I think a lot of you understand that. Badges can help value the learning that goes on and help increase the reputation and increase the success of organizations that are developing effective learning without challenging this notion that we need safe places for kids to go every day, and we need to give them a good environment that's motivated and safe. All right, that's enough about badges. I really appreciate all the time that you've offered me today. So just in closing, I do want to reflect very honestly and heartfelt that what you do and the way that you do it is really important. And there's a lot of us in positions of relative power for brief periods of time who know it. And we think it's really important. I think it's important. Many others near me think it's important. So I just want to thank you for the time that you spend with kids, the time that you spend investing in learning about technology and using that technology in those learning environments, in dealing with the bureaucracies, some instituted and run by the federal government elsewhere, knowing that breaking down those walls, challenging the boundaries of what's possible is a really important thing to be doing, and it is going to change the way our country works. And I just thank you for the effort that you put in every day towards that end. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve. And with this, we'd like for all of the attendees to have a chance for extra networking time at lunch, so you're free until 2 p.m. And remember that this evening we have a reception at the Indiana Roof Ballroom, and so we'll have more time for networking. Thank you so much for lunch. Thank you again, Steve.